You're listening to the Dre Area Sports Show, live on YouTube and X. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe.
The Dre Area Sports Show is brought to you by SeatGeek. Use promo code Dre Area Sports to save $20 on your first purchase at SeatGeek.com. And we are also brought to you by Taryn Roy, the SEO Optimizer. If you're looking to boost your YouTube channel, then check out the SEO Optimizer. Use promo code Dre Area Sports to start your free trial today. Power Brand Systems. If you're looking to build a website for your small business or YouTube channel, then check out Power Brand Systems. Use promo code 300POWER to save up to $300 on your first purchase at Power Brand Systems.
And this was fairly pivotal because for the Niners, they had to hit on a lot of these draft picks because they pretty much jettisoned their entire starting defensive line. They had a lot of holes on defense, some holes on offense as well. And so they had to really capitalize on this to really kind of bolster their team. And so looking at the draft in total, how do you think they did when it comes to this year's NFL draft?
I think they came out pretty well. Obviously, there's some draft picks that some fans and even myself are going to complain about. Nick Martin in round 3 at pick 75, a big one for fans.
I was like, what?
Not addressing the offensive line early, which it seems like they wanted to do, but just didn't get done because the Raiders took back-to-back tackles before pick 100. So there's some complaints to be had, but overall, I think when you walk into the draft knowing that you have to find 3 starting caliber defensive linemen, and that's hard to get in one draft. And it seems like they did that with Collins and Micah Williams and CJ West. I think if you're simply basing it off of, did they improve the weakest part of their roster? Yeah, they get an A+ in that direction. But like every Niners draft, and this one being one of the more, I don't want to say polarizing, but one of the more hard to sift through, knowing their schematic fits and guys don't fit your scheme, and you have to find the right guy at the right place, and sometimes the board doesn't fall your way. I think San Francisco walked away with like a B draft overall. There's some guys you like, some guys you don't like, some picks you question for sure. But I really love what they did to the defensive line. Surprisingly, they gave Robert Saleh the keys, even though they may only be here for 1 year. So, I mean, it's a good draft that has a lot of question marks, but that can easily go from a B to a B+ to an A+ if all the things click their way in the next 4 or 5 years or so.
Yeah, no, I think so. And for me, they did some things that I was hoping they wouldn't do, but they did anyway. There were certain players that they just said, well, I don't care where they rank. We just know that we want this guy.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of the case in a lot of these draft picks later in the draft. And I wouldn't even say earlier. I mean, later, even earlier as well. Their first pick in getting Micah Williams. Okay, let's start with that. So the Niners used their number 11 pick to select Micah Williams out of Georgia. I think looking at this as a whole, I think this was a good pick for the Niners. I like what he does. I like what he can bring to the table in terms of a defensive line. He's a good edge setter. The last time we even had a good edge setter opposite Nick Bosa was, I'm sad to say this, but it was Cleveland Farrell. I thought he was a good, and that was one thing he did really well, because he set the edge to keep the quarterback in the pocket. He was backup though. Yeah. And so that's why I'm kind of like, okay, is this guy a starter? I think he has to be at this point. I think he's strong. He's got long arms. He's 6'5". His arm length is able to kind of give you that stretch to keep the defender away from you, and also good at shedding defenders as well. He's still got a lot to learn, a lot to develop, but this guy has the potential to be something really, really special. And when you look at who was there when they made this draft pick, I mean, your other options were what? Shamar Stewart, who was, again, another guy who has tons of potential, but was a project, right?
Yeah.
Mike Green, who we knew they weren't going to take. There's too many outside problems. Yeah. And, obviously, it was like Derek Harmon. But I think that when you look at the rest of their draft, they made up for not taking Derek Harmon. I think they made up really well. But I like this draft pick in Micah Williams. At first, I was a little shocked by it because I fully thought that they're going to go Shamar Stewart. I just did. And then when they went Michael Williams, I was like, wow, okay. But at the end of the day, I like the draft pick. He's out of the SEC, played for Georgia. Now, Georgia does rotate their position players on defense constantly in and out. So he's not a guy who's out there for multiple consecutive possessions, just every down out there. So that may be something they do here with San Francisco. I'm not sure. But what did you think about the draft pick of Michael Williams?
To me, it was pretty expected. I didn't think they were going to take Shamar Stewart. I didn't think they were anywhere near in on James Pierce Jr. And I think, one of the recurring themes we saw in this draft class was that they took guys that have really high floors and not the highest ceilings. Now, I think Michael can grow as a pass rusher. One of the best things I've heard from him was in his post-draft press conference when he got back to San Francisco, met George Kittle, obviously saw John and Kyle and everything. He was asked by, funny enough, my coworker, Jake Hutchinson at 957 The Game, like, what do you need to improve upon? And he bluntly said, my pass rush plan. And it's really hard for some players to just be honest with themselves and honest with the media. Like sometimes they don't want to they don't want to let people know what their weaknesses are. And I think for him, being honest, like, hey, and I'm sure him being that open shows that they've talked about that behind the scenes with him. Like, hey, Michael, we love you as a run defender. You have long arms. You can reach ball carriers. You can get to quarterbacks that are mobile out of the pocket. You're super powerful. You can push the pocket around. You can play inside. You can play outside. But if we can focus your plan of attack, your upside is a lot higher than it currently is now.
Yeah.
And just him being honest, being upfront, just being open about it, to me is a good sign. But also, I think what separates him from guys like Mike Green, like James Pierce Jr., and even on day one, like Shamar Stewart, is that he's a 3-down player. And, on first and second down, you can have him play outside, set the edge. Hopefully, you have Alfred Collins and CJ West or somebody else on the inside on first and second down to be a good run stopper and run defender. And once you get teams in 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 7, 3rd and 6, you can put him inside and have him force the pocket, use that power and push guards and centers around to get to the quarterback even more and create some havoc. So I think the big separators were, at least for myself, and I'm sure from what it sounds like with San Francisco too, is that some guys were 3rd down pass rushers. Some guys were, first and second down players only. Michael is one of the few players that is a 3-down player, hopefully on day one and projects to be going forward. There's a reason why you heard Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch talk about Eric Armstead. Now, I think Michael and Armstead are different in the way they play, but Armstead had no pass rush plan coming out of Oregon. It was all run defense. Mm-hmm. And I think you saw once year 4 hit, you saw a really good, 10.5 sack player once he had, DeForest Buckner and Nick Bosa and company, and Michael already has Bosa there. And you're hoping that Alfred Collins or even CJ West can become your DeForest Buckner, where when Williams slides inside, he has some guys that can take up double teams for him. And he can use that power and get to the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, even if Michael Williams is not a huge pass rushing threat in year 1, I think he still will, accumulate sacks because you got Nick Bosa either side. Now you have a new defensive line. I think this guy has the potential to have a good pass rush, but I think the main thing that they wanted to do was they wanted a big, strong defensive or an edge rusher, defensive end to set the corner, contain the pocket, and to stop the run. And I think that's where they're kind of going with this, because we saw last season they couldn't stop the run. It was so bad. I mean, like, you and I could have rushed for 100 yards against them, and that's how bad they were, especially late in the season. So we saw Michael Williams and we said, yeah, that's freaking awesome. Love it. And then they went on to their next pick, which is number 43. Some would say this was a little bit of a stretch, but I like the pick with Alfred Collins. I think this guy is a huge defensive tackle, hard to move, good against the run. Again, they're drafting monsters. These big, tall, long-armed freaks on the defensive line. What did you think about Alfred Collins?
It's a pick that maybe I didn't champion at first because I wanted Darius Alexander, who's a more well-rounded defensive tackle on the interior, which the Giants got him in just an incredible draft for those guys out there in New York. Abdul Carter and Darius Alexander. I mean, wow. But back to Alfred Collins, he's a player that, like Michael Williams, the pass rush production really isn't there. But you think he's probably going to be a first and second down player for you. And I think he has some upside to be a pass rusher, but He has good awareness, batted down 6 passes last year. One of the best, if not the best, run defending defensive tackles in this year's class, 85 PFF run defense grade, 6'6", 332 pounds. And I think a very common theme, which goes back to high floor players, but along those same lines, San Francisco wanted guys to take up space on the interior, whether it be Michael, whether it be Alfred Collins. You have 2 guys that, although Michael's not 6'6", 330 pounds, and Alfred Collins is, they both have 34-plus inch arms. They can tackle guys while they're being blocked still. They can eat up space and make it harder and clog lanes. That's a big thing for San Francisco. Last year, they were getting bullied. And this year, you look at the run defense and you're hoping it projects to be a team that shouldn't be the one getting bullied. They should be the one doing the bullying.
Yes.
I know we, kind of frown upon, back in the 80s and the 90s and sometimes in the early 2000s, putting kids in lockers and throwing them in trash cans. But at the NFL level, you want your defense shoving guards and tackles into lockers and putting centers in trash cans.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Last year's San Francisco was the one getting shoved around. With Jordan Elliott and Evan Anderson and Malik Collins and even Javon Hargrave early before he got hurt. San Francisco, it's really hard when you're a 6'3" guard to go up against a 6'6", 330-pound defensive tackle for the next, 30-plus snaps a game. So they have a defense that, is powerful. They can hopefully wear down guards, wear down centers. So late in the game, it's 4th down. You got to get off the field or got to get a stop. Those guards are just gassed. Those centers are gassed. And then you have, boom, powerful guy comes in, gets a tackle, gets a sack, or you have the veteran guys behind them, Clea Davis, Sam Aquanu, come in and clean things up behind him. So I think it's a great pick. I think San Francisco walked into the draft, like you said, Dre, about, we have to stop the run. And a big thing about stopping the run is, one, you can hopefully limit opposing offenses and what they can do. You can force them into 3rd and longs more consistently. But also when you do that, it creates more punts, get your offense back on the field more. You can score more points, and it eliminates offenses being able to drain the clock against you late in games. And that was a big thing last year for San Francisco. Their defense couldn't get off the field to save their life. They were also blowing leads late all the time. Why? Bad tacklers, bad run defense. That is 2 areas San Francisco improved upon in this year's draft in just their first 2 picks, and they have 9 more guys to go.
Exactly. No, and overall, I like the pick of Alfred Collins. I did think that maybe it was a tad bit early for me. I might have gone a different direction, but nonetheless, I mean, at 6'6" with, almost 35-inch arms, he's a huge guy, well over 300 pounds. This is a monster to try to move, and is likely going to line up next to Nick Bosa. So he's the kind of guy that can, either him or CJ West, and they will draw double teams. And so if not, they're going to double team Nick Bosa, and then you're leaving Alfred Collins, this monster, one-on-one to either get to the running back or get to the quarterback, So that's a big advantage, if you're the 49ers. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you about was, there was the draft pick in Nick Martin. Now, I love Nick Martin. I think the guy flies around the field. He has great energy, great tackler. The guy had 140 tackles, I think, last season. Like, when you're looking at someone to replace a guy like Dre Greenlaw, this guy's flying all over the field, and I was always a big fan of him. I was drafting him in mock drafts because I was like, this guy's great. Only 5'11", so he's a little bit on the shorter side, but we've seen the trend in the NFL where it's the linebackers that are getting a little bit smaller, but they want to be faster, and they can get to the running backs. They can go from sideline to sideline. I think this is a guy that can do that for you. My only problem with this draft pick was that I thought it was too soon. This was a draft pick that I think the Niners were like, we want Nick Martin. We want him. But it was like, wait a minute, dude. You could have gotten him probably in the next round. But they were so paranoid that they weren't going to get him that they took him, I felt, a little early. Now, the guy did have a knee injury that he's coming back from, so there's a little bit of that we have to kind of, hope that heals correctly and he could rehab, properly in order to be on the field. Because obviously he'll be competing with D. Winters for that number 2 spot next to Fred Warner. We know that Nick Martin is a huge fan of Fred Warner. So he looks up to him. He's an inspiration for him. Imagine this is a guy that he even owned a Fred Warner jersey. That's how much he respected Fred Warner. And now he gets to play with him. So there's a lot of good stories around this guy. But again, it just kind of felt like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? And here's why. Look, I loved Darius Alexander, but he went with the first pick of the Giants in round 3.
Yeah,
I almost had a heart attack. Harold Fannin Jr., he went number 3 in round 3. And I was like, okay, there's another guy. And it was weird because a lot of the guys that I thought the Niners would take later in the draft just started going. We're talking about Harold Fannin. We're talking about Kyle Williams, Isaac, how do you say his last name? Tesla?
Yeah.
Isaac Tesla.
But the Lions traded up for him. So it was like three third-round picks for 1 third-round pick. So they put a lot of draft capital into getting him, which could pay off, could not. Who knows?
And then, there was a trade with Chicago and Buffalo ended up getting Landon Jackson. So you saw a lot of names going off the board
Nick Martin,
quick.
high school teammate, by the way.
Yeah. And so they took Nick Martin. Now, the name I loved, the player, I'm all for it. But I was a little shocked that they took him in the 3rd round. When you got Princely, I can never say his last name, Umanil, I can't even say it. I'm going to butcher it. The edge rusher, I thought, he would have been good from Mississippi. Jordan Birch was still out there.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at names. Jacob Parrish, Noel Williams, Jamari Caldwell.
Yeah.
I would have thought, okay, this is just me. I would have thought you could have taken Jamari Caldwell, then taken Nick Martin in the next round, but maybe not.
Yeah, it's funny because this draft pick is one that I think most Niner fans kind of said, all right, what are we doing? Okay, and my first reaction was, this is Robert Saleh's 3rd-round running back. This is him reaching for a player that he loves or somebody in that building loves and says, I don't care who else is there. I want to get him in the building. And sometimes there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you can go through the draft process, the tape, the film, the meetings, and just somehow find a way to be infatuated with the player or not. And we all do that. In some cases it was CJ West, who San Francisco got. In some cases it was Vernon Broughton, who the Saints got later in this year's draft. But yeah, this is the one where the consensus, I think this was like the biggest reach, like maybe almost in Niner history with this regime. So that is the head scratching part of like, could you have gotten him later? And I think, you can go look at the other draft picks in this year's class. You can look at, Jordan Watkins, receiver. A lot of the slot potential burners, guys that ran 4.3, 4.2 were off the board. They said, oh crap, if we don't get our guy, we're not getting one at all. And okay, so you can justify it. Okay, you wanted to get your guy. Maybe the board dictated things for you. Where in this case, it felt like San Francisco, and maybe there was some intel they got that said he wasn't going to be there, pick 100. But it just kind of looks like they reached big because they loved him a lot. And you go to the draft board, like you were mentioning, Jalen Noel was there. I'd rather have Jalen Noel than Jordan Watkins. That's just me. I'd rather have Dylan Fairchild than Connor Colby. That's just me. Mm-hmm. I'd rather have Jacob Parrish than Upton Stout. That's just me.
Yes.
I think that it was a reach. I think that, and one of the biggest things that has to be clarified here is that it's not an indication as to how good or bad Nick Martin's going to be at the NFL level.
No, not at all.
And I think Nick Martin can play. He's got the speed you want. He can go, from one sideline to the other with the flash. He's a player that has blitzing upside where if you want to run those stunts and free up people, I don't think he starts year one. I don't think he should start year one. The coverage in space is an issue, but even the length he has to kind of clog passing lanes isn't there, but to get off blockers, as a blitzer, to get to the quarterback, to use that speed, get ball carriers. He obviously had like 140 tackles in 2023 before the injury. In that exact same year, he had 60 defensive run stops. So he's a guy that can go around and get tackles, get sacks, limit how far running backs and receivers can get downfield. And he has a really high work ethic, and he was a team captain. So those things matter to San Francisco. This feels more like a character pick, and then hopefully your athletic traits can build upon that, which isn't a bad thing, but those guys you probably get on day 3. I'd rather have Nick Martin than Curtis Rourke in round 7. I'd rather trade up for Nicholas Martin in round 6 or 5. And I think that had San Francisco walked away with, say, Jacob Parrish here, then you fast forward to pick 100, maybe you're talking about moving up a little bit into the draft and maybe getting a tackle. Like, that's the difference of like, San Francisco clearly believed the draft board was going to fall their way at pick 100, and it didn't. They wanted the tackle. They clearly said, "Oh, we thought the board was going to fall differently." Oh, where? Because the Raiders took back-to-back offensive linemen right in front of you with Charles Grant and the guy from Texas Tech. So this is one of the more contentious picks amongst fans. I agree with it that it should be. But there's also intel where, San Francisco took that kicker in round 3, and then 4 picks later, so did the Patriots. So maybe there was some intel they got, but the draft board shows you that there was not a linebacker taken after Nick Martin at pick 75 going down the board. Not one more in round 3 at all.
Not one more. That's how I was looking at.
And that's the confusing part of okay, what intel did you have to say? Because the next linebacker didn't go till pick 107 to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
And which pick? And which linebacker was that? Was that Chris Paul?
Jack Kaiser.
Jack Kaiser, exactly. Notre Dame.
Yeah, right. So it wasn't Chris Paul Jr. It wasn't other guys who you interviewed. So it's a confusing pick, but one that could pay dividends down the road. He is healthy, from my understanding, and it felt more like a character pick compared to a play pick. But
yeah,
if they want to run stunts, blitz the quarterback, and create pressure where they didn't get a pass rusher on the interior, maybe Nick Martin can be that for you in some form or fashion.
Overall, like I said, I like Nick Martin. I thought it was a little bit early because there were some players there I would have rather have drafted. Yeah. You get the sense from a lot of these teams that maybe it's just the Niners, but I feel like a lot of other teams had a much better draft strategy than San Francisco. Because I saw teams, I'm sorry, but I felt like Seattle, they had a really good draft. They got good players up and down the board, players that had big upsides. And I was like, holy crap, these guys were drafting like madmen. They even got your boy Gray Zabel. They picked him.
Well, they needed him more than San Francisco did. To be
fair.
Absolutely.
But they had a really good draft. The Chiefs had a really good draft. The Ravens had a really good draft. These are all teams that are constantly the Patriots, Titans. The Giants. The Giants should have had a good draft. Come on. The draft was basically handed to them. Here, who do you guys want? Them? Yeah. Okay. If there's 2 teams that had picks that were just gimmies almost the entire time, it was the Giants and the Browns. It seemed like the Browns, it seemed like every other pick, it was the Cleveland Browns select. I was like, oh my God, they have another pick. But what did they go and do? They drafted Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders.
Hey, don't hate on Dylan Gabriel.
I'm not hating on him. I'm a huge Oregon fan. But why would you take 2 of them? Then you got Joe Flacco who's there. You got Kenny Pickett who's there.
They took 2 of them.
And then you got Deshaun Watson, who's somehow, some way still in the quarterback room.
To quote Magic Johnson, he not gonna be there.
No,
man,
they're just gonna eat his contract and be like, just go away, please. And then your Green Bay Packers, who you cover, they got Savion Williams. Hey, he's got bad hands, but he could be like a Deebo Samuel. I thought that was
going to be a running back at the NFL level.
I thought that was a little early as well. I'm just going to put that out there. I was like, oh God, okay. They and then and then the Raiders. So we're talking about round 3.
Yeah,
they took Caleb Rogers, right? Caleb Rogers out of Texas Tech, and I thought, okay, hey, that's a good pick. And then the next pick, Charles Grant. I was like, you son of a bitch. God damn you. And then I feel like the Niners maybe were considering Charles Grant. I don't know. But then
when their pick came on their board.
And then when the pick came around, they were like, okay, Upton Stout. A name that I was familiar with, but again, I was like, oh, you went Upton Stout. But I guess, you had other corners going ahead of him. Even Jalen Smith out of USC was gone. So I was like, okay, he's not a bad corner. I like him, and I think he also played some safety as well.
Yeah, he did.
So I was okay with Upton Stout. But again, when you took Nick Martin over all those guys, I thought, okay, that's a little interesting. And then when you move on to round 4, I thought that, okay, they may have sort of swung and missed in round 3, but they got a good shot in at the end. And then when it came to round 4, I felt like it got a little better when you got CJ West. And to me, that guy didn't have to be there.
No, he didn't. That guy probably should have been gone on day 2.
He should have been gone. I was like, oh my God, he's still there. And what's funny is that when I'm watching the draft, like when I'm doing a mock draft, right? I'm looking at all the players that are still there, and I'm like, oh, he's still there. Oh, that guy's still there. I bet you he'll be there next time around. I can't see the players that are on the board still, so I'm just like, oh God, he's still there.
Going in blind.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm just going in blind. I'm like, oh shit. The guy I wanted, obviously, I really, really wanted him to get was Darius Alexander. That didn't work out. Cam Scatteraboo, he went to the Giants as well. But when you look at CJ West, another guy that I was a big fan of, I like the draft pick. I love how they went another D tackle, which they needed. He's a senior, so he's got a lot of experience. 6'1", 316 pounds. He's got 31.5-inch arms. Not a very long arm guy, but this is a very stout guy who's going to help in your run game and solidifying your defensive line. So to me, I love this pick. I thought it was a great pick for San Francisco. What did you think of CJ West?
Oh, it's a home run. This is a player that shouldn't have been there. And I think if you flipped Nicholas Martin and CJ West, a lot of people would have left problems with the picks, which doesn't justify it in any way, but it's just like, okay, like Nick Martin around 4 isn't that big of a deal. But I think, CJ West is like 3 years younger than Darius Alexander. He's a bowling ball. And I went on Twitter or X right after, and I was like, a lot of you wanted DJ Jones this offseason. Well, you got him for about a quarter of the price and like 4 years younger.
Yeah.
And look, DJ Jones is great, but this is a home run pick for San Francisco. A guy where you talk about, on first and second down, I don't know where he projects to be in the depth chart, but around 4 defensive tackle who probably is a top 50 player, top 75 player in this year's draft. You probably want that guy to start for you on day one. He may not, but he's a guy that's borderline unmovable. He's so low to the ground, has natural leverage. And honestly, this is my favorite pick of the entire draft for them.
Yes, this was a badass pick. I was like,
he wasn't supposed to be there. You got lucky. It was a luxury pick. Like, oh my God, I can't believe he's still there for you. And I think he's one of the players that, while yes, he can stack and shed against the run and take on double teams and free up space for guys on the interior during those stunts and move guards and centers out of the way to clear up space for Alfred Collins or, Kalia Davis or somebody else who's playing on the interior for them. Maybe Yetur Gross-Matos on stunts or Michael Williams on stunts. I think he also has a higher pass rushing upside than Alfred Collins, where you were seeing early in mock drafts during the process of like CJ West going higher than Alfred Collins sometimes. So I'm shocked he was there, but I'm insanely happy he was there. Like this is a home run pick. Every Niner fan should be on the mountaintops, just screaming that their elation that they got CJ West in San Francisco.
Awesome content, Sterling Brookings. All right.
I host the podcast earlier today, and my last name is Brookings now, so we're good.
Okay, there we go.
Nick, we love you, though. We love you.
He
Nick
has officially changed his name. His stage name is Sterling Brookings, or maybe it's the other way around. I'm not sure. This is a guy, too, that he played in all 13 games. He started 10 of those 13 games. He had 42 tackles, 7.5 tackles for losses with 2 sacks.
Yeah.
This guy is a game wrecker, and I love they got him. And yeah, I think his comp would be DJ Jones, and that's exactly what they needed for the no word correction. But no, that's exactly what they needed for their defensive line. I would rather have this defensive line than the one we had last season. Last season ended up becoming just like a patchwork defensive line, which at first, Malik Collins, I was excited for. Quickly, I was not. So I love what they did. I really love what they did with their defensive line this year.
Last year with the defensive line, not that it was a good unit, but it was a higher floor unit that got decimated by injuries relatively early. Gross-Matos got hurt early. Hargrave got hurt in game 3. And that isn't to say they were going to be great with those guys healthy, but you were asking a lot of guys to play positions more often. Like Malik Collins really isn't a first or second, or he's just not an early down player. He's that third down interior pass rusher when it's 3rd and 7, when it's 3rd and 8, a guy that in retrospect, you'd probably want to have on your roster now, knowing your personnel. But that is the one area I am shocked San Francisco really didn't address. Well, I do think CJ West has pass rushing upside on the interior. I'm shocked they didn't try for a Joshua Farmer or an Aeneas Peebles or a Zeke Biggers or guys late in round 7 or 6 and via trade up that and maybe they tried and couldn't get a deal done. I think Green Bay said they were trying to trade back and get draft picks for next year, and this team said no. So It kind of feels like that maybe some teams were kind of stuck in the mud saying we're not moving here. So but we'll never know that. Obviously, San Francisco tried to go up and get Michael Williams, and Carolina said no because McMillan was there. So it's something that we can theorize and maybe try to say they could have, should have done this, but maybe they couldn't do it. But I'd rather have, Joshua Farmer from Florida State compared to Curtis Rourke in round 7. But
yeah, I mean, for me, after this pick of CJ West, I felt like the draft started going in a really weird direction. And I felt like it went in the direction of like, okay, now you're drafting players that are like, your team's already stacked. And now you just drafted players because you're like, I kind of like that guy. You know what? Let's go for it. Fuck it. It's what it felt like. I mean, look, I get why they took Jordan Watkins. They wanted a guy that had speed, a burner, like a stretch the field, and I get that, and I wasn't really that upset about that. I mean, obviously, like Joshua Farmer went ahead of him. I think maybe they would have. I don't think they even would. At this point, I don't even think they would have taken him, but because I think they've already gotten two defensive tackles. In some of my drafts, I took like 3 defensive tackles because I just wanted more depth there, or I took 2 edge rushers just to give them more rotational depth. And then that way you can kind of weed out the guys you don't really want to hang on to, And that's another reason why they probably kept you to your Gross Matos, because they were like, hey, this is a rotational piece, and plus he's younger than Leonard Floyd. Yeah. They're like, I'd rather pay the younger guy than have the older guy.
You can also play inside too.
Yeah. And so when we go over to, I mean, Jordan Watkins, I like the pick as a receiver. We needed receiving help regardless, and I think they saw a lot of the big receivers were gone by then. And most of these drafts, some of those receivers were still around, and in this draft, a lot of them went very early. So I thought, okay, so they made a move. I get it. I like it. We can move on. Shedeur Sanders went in the next round, number 6. That was the big talk. I don't care.
Who cares?
And then I did want to say this at numbers. The 7th pick in the 4th round, number 145, Mac McWilliams, short arm.
Oh boy! Where'd he go?
He went to the Eagles. He went to the Eagles.
He's flying out there with the little
flying with the little arms. He's like a penguin.
He ain't flying. He's fluttering. He's trying to get up. But look, like we all kind of laughed at that when I was talking about it with you and Johnny. But like he went to the perfect place, Philadelphia.
Yeah, he did.
Like, man.
So the next pick they took was Jordan James. I like the pick. I think he's a serviceable backup running back. What's that?
People hate this pick.
They hated this pick. I didn't mind it.
I don't know why.
Well, I mean, like Jaden Blue was out there, which there was a lot of talk about him. I think it was kind of over-talked.
5 fumbles last year wasn't good.
And that's the thing, is that Jordan James doesn't fumble. And there's one thing that Kyle Shanahan loves about running backs is the guys who don't fumble. Look at what's his face? Elijah Mitchell. Thank you. I was going to say Elijah Moore. I was on it. Elijah Mitchell didn't fumble the ball. I mean, constantly did not fumble the ball. So, but again, you saw Jeffrey Boston get drafted by the Chiefs, and who had a good draft. And you look at everybody else. The pick after this one, right? So I like Jordan James. Like, hey, that's cool. I'm actually cool with this pick. I like it.
I would have rather had DJ Giddens, but I have no complaints about the pick.
But still, I think, and he came from a big program as well in Oregon. Yeah. That was the thing that I saw a lot, was that the picks they put a lot of value into were players that came from teams that were in like the SEC, that went against bigger competition. Okay. That's what they were looking for. And I think that's another reason why they probably didn't take Darius Alexander, because he came from, was it Tulane? And
Toledo.
It's a Toledo, a smaller school. They wanted guys who took on big competition. When you look at Oregon,
San Francisco took Samuel Womack out of Toledo a couple of years back, and different players, different years, different teams, different positions, but like that didn't pay off for them. And I think maybe it burned them, maybe it didn't, but you can tell San Francisco, like you're saying, and kind of hinting towards, like they made an effort last year to get older players, day one ready players that are older rookies. And this year it was, we'll take you younger, but we want you playing against, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, USC,
bigger competition,
big dogs in the college football playoffs and stuff. Yeah.
So this is where I got really pissed, because then all of a sudden they took Maris Seagull out of Kansas State.
Maris Seagull.
And this is a guy that I knew nothing about. Out of all my mock drafts, this guy was never once on my radar. So I was like, whoa, what? Like, what the hell? But what really pissed me off was this, Sterling. I mean, When you look at who was still there, they passed on Jackson Slater. They passed on Miles Frasier. They passed on Chris Paul Jr., Jackson Hawes, and Denzel Burke for this guy. This is where I got pissed. I was like, I'm seeing big time talent here, and you went for Maris Seagull, a safety that was not even really a guy that stood out in anyone's mock draft. But again, a guy that they felt he fits our culture. I thought, come on, man. You gotta be kidding me with this.
It's day 3, and I think what you're getting at is what a lot of fans are hinting towards. And it's what I was kind of upset about. But I do wonder, although I don't think Maris Seagull is going to be a day 1 player for them, I think he needs some time to get better in coverage. And he has the speed. I think he can grow into that roaming safety that can cover a lot of ground quickly. But the coverage leaves something desired. He's really good near the line of scrimmage, making plays, making tackles. So I think he actually may fight for that nickel spot. I also wouldn't be shocked to see Upton Stout play.
Yeah, I think Upton Stout
this year. But they also brought in like 4 safeties. The Richie Grant, Jason Pinnock, Cyron Neal is there, George Odom's still there.
Yeah, they did. But that's what I'm saying. It's like when you look at who was still there, Jackson Slater was still there.
Yeah.
Miles Frasier, and you didn't take these guys, and what happened?
Yeah,
Frasier went to the Lions. Chris Paul went to the Rams.
Yeah, which may feed into the Nick Martin would have slid conversation to late day 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
Look, they took Chris Paul Jr., and then on top of that, there were other linebackers in this round that would have gone ahead of Nick Martin.
Maybe,
so that's where Maybe, but I think that's what would have happened. And so I was really upset about this. This is where I think the draft started to kind of go in a weird direction.
Well, put that graphic back up for a second, because I think a lot of what you're getting at and a lot of what fans are disliking is because you see teams like the Lions who, they had a hole, but needed offensive linemen and got it. You saw teams like the Eagles who don't need any offensive linemen, still drafting them. And while, yes, San Francisco is in a different place than Philadelphia is, coming off a Super Bowl, a more stacked roster, all that stuff, one of my complaints is that, yes, you want to try to emulate what the Rams did and what the Eagles have done on the defensive line, getting guys on the interior, get to the quarterback, use their power, and just disrupt and force some pressure. And all that's, I think San Francisco aced that part of this draft class, but you flip it. The Rams, although don't have a great offensive line, have put in the draft picks to hopefully get better. They paid certain players to get better. The Bears had a terrible offensive line last year. What'd they do? Went and got Drew Dahlman, went and got Jackson from the Rams, went and made the effort to get better. The Philadelphia Eagles are drafting 2 offensive linemen every year, signing offensive linemen every year, knowing that, yes, you need to have good receivers and a good quarterback, but Jalen Hurts is not that much better, if better than Brock Purdy at all. Yeah. They're in that same tier to me, and they've been to 2 Super Bowls and won one of them in an insane fashion. But the way they won that game was having control of the line of scrimmage on both sides.
Yeah.
San Francisco, I think, now can control one of those, and hopefully to emulate Philadelphia's defense and the Rams' defense. But how do you combat really good defensive line play? Mm-hmm. Good offensive line play. I get it. You want to emulate what their strategy is on defense, but you got to have guys that can block that really good defensive line. And you do that, you draft and you stash, or you draft day 1 starters or sign free agents on the offensive line. Which
if they would have got Miles Frasier or Jackson Slater and just said, hey, he's a rotational piece to give us more depth to the offensive line,
back up on day 1.
Ecstatic. I'd be like, yes, thank you for addressing that. They did with Connor Colby. The guy didn't have a single penalty against him all year. Hey, get him in there. Let him eat. Overall, though, I thought the draft, I gave it a B- because of the later picks I thought were a little unorganized, and I didn't like what they did.
How did you feel about Curtis Rourke? You can't block for Brock Purdy or Mac Jones. Draft the guy that has 2 torn ACLs and a broken thumb, brother.
He can't move. He's got a good arm, but I just felt it was unnecessary. I was like, we don't really need this. You just signed Mac Jones.
That's a stash pick.
Yeah, but and you still have Tanner Mordecai. I mean, it's just kind of like you didn't need to do this, but whatever. Yeah. At this point, it doesn't really matter. If you had to grade the draft, what would you grade it?
I think if you just kind of dissect it and you go defensive line's an A+ for me.
A+.
Linebacker with where Nicholas Martin was taken, I'd probably give that pick like a D+. Not because of him, but because of where he was picked. That brings down a whole chunk of grade for me. I think overall I'd give it right around where you're giving it, a B+. There's a lot of guys that can contribute on day one that maybe shouldn't. Maris Seagull or Siegel if they don't get much from Jair Brown, or Mustafa gets hurt for longer, albeit his mom seems pretty adamant he'll be back pretty soon.
Well, exactly.
And I think B+ is probably, or I don't know if there's like a B.5+. I don't know if that works for you.
A B. It'd be a solid B.
Between where I'm at right now, it's like leaning towards B+, but not quite there.
Yeah, I just felt the second half of the draft got a little out of control, and I felt like they were drafting by committee. Like, what do you guys think? Who do you want?
Yeah.
Fuck it. All right, let's go with that guy. Instead of being like, no, this is what we're gonna do.
Well, that's where a lot of late in the draft, you tell early it was like Sala, who do you like? Save us. In the draft is where they start pointing towards, okay, you're the scout in Indiana, you're the scout here. Like who do you like? Who do you like? And you get down to the board and you're like, that's where the regional scouts come into play, and that's where you have, a lot of guys that are at Senior Bowls, at the Hula Bowl, at the Shrine Bowl, and like go watching Southeast Arkansas, HBCU. You're like, where is that? And they find guys, you go, oh my God, they're going to be a star somewhere. So we'll see if they pay off. I just really don't like Curtis Rourke.
I don't like it.
I like him. Players, just not the pick.
Yeah, I mean, even the last pick, I wasn't a huge fan of. I know that was a player that Brant Boyer really wanted, and they probably just said, fuck it, let's give it to him. But I thought that there could have been some better players taken in the mid to third half or third quarter of the draft, and I think they kind of fumbled on that. So real quick,
it's almost like they're writing a script for a movie, and the beginning gets you hooked, and you're like, this is going to be incredible. And there's that mid-act lull, and you're hoping for a big climax, and you're like, it's kind of okay. Like
if you cover movies like I do on my other channel, this is the equivalent of like a J.J. Abrams movie where it starts out like action-packed, full of like all kinds of crazy shit, and you're like, dude, this is badass. And then he can never end the movie, so at the end you're just kind of like, well, I guess that's over. So let's move on.
The entire Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah, the entire Star Wars trilogy. There you go. Thank you for watching this video. If you want more of this content, then check out some of these recommended videos right here on your screen. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so by going to my website, which is nicotina.net, and there are memberships available under Dre Area Sports.